Hello everyone, and welcome again to Shaman's Way. We're actually recording out of a proper sound booth today, just to experiment.
Out of a proper sound booth and look what we do for our listeners. Isn't that fabulous? Well, we go on road trips for them.
Absolutely, and it's been very cool so far. We have some other soundtracks and stuff that we've been recording with the drums and the rattles, so we're excited to get that out. It's been kind of a fun day.
It has been a great day, yeah.
And today you're going to be talking about some ghosts and nightmares and such, Cricket. What's on the menu?
I thought I would do a really personal podcast and call it Ghosts, Nightmares, and Bad Journeys. And what I really wanted to do was invite you a little bit more into my reality. I'm sure that how I grew up in relation to spirits is not going to be unlike how lots of my listeners have grown up, whether they were continually inundated by ghosts, whether they were very aware of spiritual energy. Some of us are empaths, some of us are clairaudient, some of us are clairsentient. We all have different ways of perceiving the world around us. What is interesting, I think, about ghosts is that they're perceiving the world around them. Henceforth, you are in the world which surrounds the ghost at the same time that the ghost is in the world that surrounds you. It is a paradox. It is, again, that aspect of the relationship of the perceived and the perceiver. As much as the universe is looking at you, you are also looking back at the universe. Ghosts are different from poltergeists, and I really won't go into a lot of the difference between ghosts and poltergeists. Suffice to say that I've run into more ghosts in my life than I've run into poltergeists. I've run into more ghosts in my life than I certainly have run into what is commonly referred to as a demon. But that's my experience, and I know some people's experiences are different. I grew up in a really old house on an old farm, and it was and had its own potential for lots of ghosty things to occur. There was oftentimes things that moved. There were sounds, lights. There were always lights on the walls going up and down. I thought it was so normal that there were lights on walls that when I went to go sleep over at my friends' houses, I was absolutely flabbergasted that they didn't have blue lights that entertained them on the wall while they went to sleep. I just thought it was normal. And much to my chagrin, it was not normal. But I quickly learned, maybe after 2 sleepovers, not to discuss the blue lights that were missing on their walls. And I like the ghosts in my life. When I am at my own home, I do a lot of healing work in my home. I have what is called a crystal that is dedicated as a waiting room that was commissioned, created, and put together simply to give the spirits that are wandering through my house a place to rest and know that they would be safe, so that when a certain time of the moon came along, I would do my ceremonies and open up the portals to the different worlds, so whatever spirits are in the waiting room are allowed to and encouraged to return to whatever home their home is. So in my house, it's never a question of if I have spirits. It's always a question of who's in the house. Earlier this week, and we're recording this in mid-May, and earlier this week, I went into my bathroom and there was a scent of perfume. I'm not really a big perfume fan, but for some reason, I recognized this perfume, and I was not able to pinpoint it. It lasted all night. Did I communicate with the spirit in my bathroom? No, not really. Did it take a lot of energy for that spirit to create the scent of flowers or cheap perfume for me to get my attention? Absolutely it did. Do I recognize that? Absolutely. However, just because you come to my house doesn't necessarily mean that I'm in a place to specifically help you. I do know that spirits and ghosts seek me out. I'm not always the easiest person to find or to get a hold of. Sometimes people phone me and it takes me a couple of weeks to return the phone call. And so I'm not really very easy. So I know that when people phone me for house clearings or compassionate depossessions, that those spirits are looking for me. And I think the reason that those ghosts are looking for me is because I have the tools to get them off this earth plane that they're stuck on. Not every spirit or ghost wants to leave, but that's a whole other topic, and maybe you can meet up with your friends over a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or heavens, not over a glass of wine. That would be too bad to talk about ghosts over wine. What a shame that would be. So in relation to ghosts, they are commonly there. They can be very frightening, but one of the, I think the hidden gems of having ghosts in your life is that you are made conscious and aware that the world exists beyond you and the world does not exist because of you, and that there are more things in the world that we do not understand than we ever can understand. How a ghost specifically materializes so that you can see its features, its face, its entire body, and seem very solid is a mystery to me. I can give you what I think might be happening, and you can talk to other people who investigate ghosts, and they can tell you what is happening. But if someone said that they truly have the answer, I would be rather skeptical. If you have ghosts in your life, perhaps you're being called to something that is different or something that you could have more fun with. The other part that I wanted to talk about is nightmares. And not because nightmares are specifically tied to ghosts, but there is a tie when I have people who are living in a house that has a particular number of ghosts. Oftentimes what happens is that the fear that they feel from those ghosts, as well as the psychic energy of the ghosts, creates nightmares. When I grew up, I had nightmares pretty much my entire life. As a very young child, it's one of my first memories is the memory of a nightmare. Living in haunted houses, I believe, encouraged that psychic energy and the ability to tap in between the worlds and be able to be influenced psychically by that which was around me. That may have not been the case. However, it has been my experience with energy exchanges between my embodied self and another disembodied self, that the disembodied self can most certainly affect my energy and my thoughts, as I have encountered in compassionate depossessions and as I have encountered in beings that have provided me information when I've opened my body to mediumship. Nightmares are often from a dream analysis perspective. Those things that are really bothering you, if you have an abusive childhood, if you have PTSD, if you have ongoing depression coupled with severe anxiety, or any number of imbalances between the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual body, however they manifest, nightmares will come to many different people. What I have found over the years working shamanically is that I have encountered many of the things that chased me in my dreams. I have encountered many things that have frightened me in my dreams. I have uncovered them doing years of shadow work and years of trying to understand my own psychic wounds and how to heal my psychic wounds as a result of uncovering, unearthing, digging deep within my own psyche, trying to assess and determine what is a wound versus what is fresh healing, working with the principles of shamanic healing for my own self. They have really enabled me to release the drama of nightmares on a daily basis. When we have journeys that affect us very deeply, then at times those journeys can come into our dreams as well. Not necessarily as nightmares, but they can certainly affect our dreams. I ask patients after they've had a soul retrieval, an extraction, compassionate depossession, or just simply an energy balancing that they've come for, or to kind of right their soul and their body and make it fit a little more comfortably, I do ask people to pay attention to their dreams. We are well aware that dreams are the mind's force and sense of the alert awareness, or the deep awareness, or the psyche awareness. We may only have X amount of the brain conscious, so we have 95% of the mind that is unconscious. When we are sleeping, as much as when we are dreaming, we are able to move between the worlds with more freedom than I think we have the ability to do. One example that I'd love to share with you about dreams, and I'm going to preface this just for a moment with a short story. I have a friend that I work with, and my friend really likes to look up strange videos on YouTube. And I was sent through my office a collection of 5 videos that she found on YouTube that were really interesting cases to point to the existence of teleportation. And in older shamanic traditions, they talk about, and the older shamans were able to do bilocation. There are many myths and many stories that talk about the ability to bilocate. So, Doug, you could be here in this space that we are, and you could end up also in Romania because you had some aspect of you that needed to be found in Romania. And people in Romania would see you.
It's very quantum.
Very quantum. And there were 2 of the 5 little short YouTube videos. There were 2 that were absolutely, in my mind, not fake. They sure as hell didn't seem fake. And the reason that it didn't seem fake to me was because the arrival of the teleported person shook. So an individual ended up on a bike. So you would think that a bike traveling behind another human being, generally we are going in a straight path, we're pretty good balanced. This bike materialized from this gentleman right behind him in his spine area, jutted out to the left, and the person on the bike lost their balance for a second, almost as though they were skirting around a corner that they didn't know was there. It was quite fascinating. Many years ago, I believe I was 19 at the time, and I was going to university in the small town of Camrose. I had a most vicious nightmare, and there were many aspects of that nightmare that actually came to pass, including the death of my brother-in-law, the loss of sibling. There were 3 aspects that really came to pass, and it was an absolutely frightening nightmare. I believe it was within a very short period of time, less than a week, possibly 2 days after the dream. I was sitting in my friend's car in downtown Camrose, which consists of 3 blocks on either side, and standing right in front of the car was the man who had killed my brother-in-law in my journey. And he stood and he stared and he stared. I'd never been so frightened in my entire life. Here was this human being standing in front of me that had been in my dream. So the concept of traveling between the worlds, and he literally appeared out of nowhere. I did not see him walk up to the car. And when Anita got into the car and we drove away, and I sat and looked at him for 12 minutes. I watched the clock on the car. And as soon as she got in the car, he literally disappeared. I'd never been so frightened in my life up to that point. I was shaking. My mouth was dry. I had no frame of reference for this whatsoever. And even to this day, I cannot explain it. I can only say, this is my experience. This is what happened. Whether you accept it as reality or not is irrelevant to me. It was and is an active part of my reality and truly shifted my view of what our perception of reality is. From nightmares, there are experiences that shamans talk about, and whether they're modern shamans or whether they're traditional shamans, you can always find stories of horrible things that have happened. We have stories in South America of shamans being eaten by the River King, and the River King is the anaconda. We have stories from the Maibu peoples within California where they talk about the disaster of a woman who was in love with a star lord or a star person and the horror that happened to them. But there are also monster stories in all of our legends. We have lots of monster stories. What I find fascinating is, I know I've talked about this before, but there are many people who, when they journey, they experience very positive experiences. They don't generally encounter beings that they have to engage and fight. They don't generally encounter aspects that will really encourage a warrior. I don't know if having nightmares for most of my life was what gave me the skill set to walk into the journeys and be able to fight or be taught how to fight and have no compunction in fighting. And yet it's a very different kind of world. And I may be getting a little bit over people's heads, but I kind of wanted to talk about bad journeys, because lots of times we hear about are the sunshine wishes and the candy cane kisses, and I met this being and I got to fly on this being's back and the world was beautiful, and I got to ride on a dolphin and I went underwater and lo and behold I could breathe underwater. And those are all perfectly valid and perfectly amazing and astounding, but sometimes things don't go that way at all. I had an experience recently in a journey where I was journeying to aid someone in changing their bad luck. And I knew before I went into my journey that there was negative energy around her. And when we talk about ghosts, oftentimes we talk about negative ghosts. Those are a lot of times poltergeists, whereas ghosts are fairly benign. They just want your attention. Poltergeists are the assholes that you really have to watch out for. But I digress. I'm going to go back to the bad journeys. I don't know if because I had a lot of training in how to run really fucking fast, how to be really, really scared, or how to face my dangers, that when I started to do the spirit world, that is what I encountered, was that I encountered the not so kind beings or the not so fun situations. But the journey that I had the other day completely unprepared me and also gave me an opportunity to confirm my suspicions. So let me talk a little bit about what happened in the journey. In the journey, I was able to see the house of the person and the spouse and the baby, and the house was very protected. It had this source of light, or like a force field around it. I guess that would be the most accurate way to describe it. Around this force field were horrible black beings. Some took the form of half of a horse with snorting noses and red eyes and the mane that struck behind it, and behind that were swirling tendrils of darkness and evil. And I'm really used to negotiating in the spirit world. I've been doing soul retrievals for many years. I've encountered many types of malevolent, nasty ass, broke ass punk motherfuckers in the spirit world, and rarely get hurt. And it isn't because I have luck. It's because I've been well trained. I was well trained by demons to fight demons. And that's a whole other story that I'm not going to get into today. So I have a certain level of confidence when I encounter beings that are not really quite that fun. As I stood in front of or surrounded by this darkness, what I knew that this was an entire generation's demons within a family. I'm going to back up and say that I have worked within the foster care system. I've worked within the foster care system for a lot of years. I grew up in the foster care system, and one of the aspects of shamanism is recognizing what are family patterns, what are family curses, and what are the demons of addiction? What do they look like? What do the demons of abuse look like? How many curses have been sent down through the families? And when I encountered these horrific beings trying to get to this small child in the house, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that everything I had suspected in my work was personified in this journey. I have been doing my work for many years in the capacity working with foster children for almost 9 years. And in all of those years, I've also done soul retrieval work. In all of those years, I have never encountered anything like this. And in the journey, I suffered a dire physical injury. And the injury in the spirit world terrified me enough to think I could theoretically and quite possibly die right here, right now. And I'm going to share with you that it is a common acceptance of people in the spirit world, shamans, shamanic practitioners, when they go into the darker side of the journeys into the underworlds of the lower world, it is accepted that you have to take on the truth that you could die. The last recorded shaman dying during a soul retrieval happened in the Yukon in 1957. In 1957, a shaman was journeying to find a soul piece for a particular person within his village. I suspect, and the accounts that I read suspect, that he went to go see Sedna. And Sedna is the goddess of the underwater, goddess of the sea for the Inuit. While there, you have to be very careful when negotiating with Sedna. We cannot apply human emotions to a being that has never been human. It is amoral. It is not immoral. It is simply amoral. What occurred for this shaman in the middle of his journey was a hole opened up in his side, and his intestines started to come from this rather large gaping wound, and he literally bled to death. What was suspected was that a narwhal, which is a sea creature that lives in the north that has a horn on its head for poking through the ice, which incidentally was harvested as unicorn horn and sold in Japan and China and almost killed the narwhal. However, I digress. The narwhal is a protector, one of the protector spirits or one of the guardians for Sedna. So it is hypothesized that the shaman in some way offended Sedna, and Sedna sent the narwhal to kill the shaman. And as a result, the physical body of the shaman died. In this particular journey that I was moving through, I did not have my alert awareness and complete awareness available to me, and I suffered a mortal wound. It was unlike almost any other experience I've had. I've had one other experience like this, and I know that I could have died at that point in time, and I know during this journey I could also have died. In the room, while doing my drumming, I could feel my physical body manifesting the symptoms of bleeding out of the stomach. So the weakness in the legs, the very slow heart rate, the weakness in my arms, my mouth going dry. And all I could do was beat my drum, because I knew the only thing I could do was keep myself in the spirit world long enough to pray that there was a cure for the black magic, the dark magic, the evil magic that I had been wounded by. It will take time to heal from that. I feel physically fine. I feel as though all of my soul pieces are together, and the darkness, the sickness, the illness is out of my body. But today I feel amazingly vulnerable, amazingly human, and I am very emotional. I am tangibly human. I have been literally touched by a source outside of myself. And as I sit here, I am questioning my own path. I am examining my own path. I feel viscerated. I was incredibly shaken, and I was quite scared. And the more I think about it, the more scared I become. Am I thinking about the lesson in this right now? I don't give a shit what the lesson is. Right now, I am really trying to deal emotionally with what was a very traumatic experience in the spirit world. And this was done as an act of service to somebody else. So ghosts, nightmares, and bad journeys are all friends of one another. They all leave us changed. They all leave us with a sense of wonder of the world, but they also leave us with that knowledge that the world outside of us, as loving and beautiful as it is cold as a motherfucker. And that's all I have to say on that today, Doug.
Well, thank you very much for sharing. I know this was just yesterday that this all happened, so...
yeah, it was.
Yeah, a bit of a tough journey for you, and I think, not to that extent, but I think anybody who's journeyed for quite a while will bump into these, so it's a good topic to bring up. And
I think so. And I think it is a topic that needs to be discussed, because we have this illusion that everything is sunshine, wishes, and candy cane kisses, and the world bends over backwards to help us. And that is usually the case, but sometimes you are vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a contact us page on our forum as well, so if anybody does have something that they need to talk about,
feel free.
Reach out and let us know, and because it is one that less people are probably comfortable talking about, and it's not always comfortable for us to talk about it, but we're willing and able.
We are willing and able, and it's also very refreshing to be vulnerable in, guess what, not everyone is perfect, and even though I've been at this for a long period of time, it doesn't mean that I can't get into trouble.
Yeah.
And if I can get into trouble, who else can get into trouble?
Yeah, not a lot of us have 25 plus years of doing this, so
no.
For sure. All right. So if you do have questions or want to share your own stories, just head on over to shamansway.net, and we're there to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.